She kept it hidden for decades, locked away, sealed in silence, protected behind a wall even her own daughter never climbed. And the world always wondered why. People thought Priscilla Presley was guarding memories, or protecting Elvis's image, or keeping the press from twisting something sacred. But the truth, the real truth, is far more human, far more painful, and far heavier than anyone imagined. Because what Priscilla Presley kept hidden wasn't an object. It was a moment, a confession, a final piece of Elvis's heart that he never wanted Lisa Marie to carry. And it all begins with something so small most people would overlook it, a drawer. A single drawer in Priscilla's bedroom that remained locked even long after she left Graceland. A drawer she never opened in front of staff, never opened in front of friends, never opened in front of Lisa Marie, even when Lisa asked her in one of her most vulnerable moments, "Mom, what am I missing? What didn't he tell me?" Priscilla always gave the same soft answer. Some things were your father's to keep. But what she really meant was this. Some things were too heavy for you to carry. Because inside that drawer was something Elvis left behind, a truth so private that speaking it aloud would have broken the story Lisa Marie carried about her father. Not because it was ugly, not because it would damage his legacy, but because it revealed the one thing Elvis tried desperately to hide, even from the people he loved most. That truth is what Priscilla protected. That truth is what she carried alone. And that truth is what you're about to hear. But before we reach the moment Elvis revealed it, before we explore the night Priscilla realized what he'd really been asking of her, before we uncover why she kept this secret from Lisa Marie until the very end, we must begin at the heartbeat of the story. A quiet night, a shaken woman, a memory she couldn't outrun. It happened years after Elvis passed. A close friend of Priscilla's said it was just an ordinary evening filled with ordinary conversation until an old demo of Elvis's voice came on in the background. It wasn't a hit. It wasn't one of the songs the world associates with him. It was a raw, unpolished recording he made late at night. Just Elvis, tired, reflective, whispering words into a microphone that wasn't meant for anyone else's ears. And when Priscilla heard it, she froze. Her friend said the room seemed to shift, as if a ghost had entered. Priscilla didn't speak, didn't blink, didn't breathe for a full 5 seconds. Then, without warning, she covered her mouth, turned away, and whispered something under her breath, words her friend has never forgotten. Lisa can never know about that night. That night. The night she had spent decades trying to bury. The night Elvis revealed the part of himself he had spent years hiding. The night he told Priscilla the truth that would shape the rest of her life. And that is where our story begins, not with fame, not with the legend, not with the king the world saw, but with the man behind the myths. The father who adored his daughter with every breath he had, and the woman who protected his final wish. This is the secret Priscilla kept hidden, even from Lisa Marie. A secret that would change the way the world understands Elvis, Priscilla, and the fragile pieces of love left behind after someone is gone. Because sometimes the most powerful truths are the ones whispered in the dark. And sometimes the ones we protect are the ones that hurt the most. Now let's step into the heart of it. Before we uncover that moment, before we reveal what Elvis told Priscilla and why she vowed to shield Lisa from it, we must understand the emotional battlefield this family lived on. Because Elvis Presley wasn't just the king of rock and roll. He wasn't just a superstar with a voice that shook the world. He was a man whose heart was constantly torn in 2 directions. The world pulling on one side and his family pulling on the other. And no one felt that tension more deeply than Priscilla. From the moment she met Elvis, she saw something no one else did. Yes, he was magnetic. Yes, he was powerful. But beneath the swagger, beneath the fame, beneath the legend, she saw a man who often felt like he was standing on a tightrope above a world that wanted to consume him. Elvis carried a weight inside him, one he didn't show to the fans screaming his name or the photographers capturing his smile. He showed it in private moments, quiet pauses, long exhalations at the end of a performance when the lights went out and he finally stopped pretending he was invincible. Priscilla was the witness to those moments. She saw the cracks long before the world did. She heard the quiet questions he didn't dare voice to anyone else. What if he couldn't balance it all? What if he couldn't be the father he wanted to be? What if the world took more from him than he had left to give? And when Lisa Marie was born, everything intensified. Elvis adored her. He held her with a gentleness few people understood. He talked about her future with the wide-eyed hope of a man who felt, for the first time, like he had a reason to be more than an icon. But he was terrified. Terrified that the chaos of his life, the pressure, the expectations, the emotional storms would touch her. Terrified that the pain he hid so well would someday become the pain she'd inherit. Terrified that she would grow up searching for answers he didn't know how to give. This is the real beginning of The Secret. Not a locked drawer. Not a private letter. Not a moment after Elvis was gone. But the years leading up to it, the slow build of fear, guilt, love, and longing inside a man who seemed to have everything except peace. Priscilla watched that internal battle unfold day after day. She saw how the spotlight fed the world but starved the man. She saw the exhaustion he masked beneath charm. She saw the way his shoulders dropped when he thought no one was looking. She saw the love he had for Lisa and the fear that came with it. And then there was the night. The night Elvis told her something so vulnerable, so raw, that she kept it hidden for the rest of her life. Because that night, Elvis gave her the one truth Lisa could never hear. A truth that would explain his distance, his sadness, his choices, and his greatest fear as a father. A truth that would break a child's heart if she ever knew it, and break a mother's heart if she ever said it. Priscilla's entire life after that night became a balancing act. Protect Elvis, protect Lisa, protect the story from collapsing under the weight of what he had confessed. And the world never knew. They saw tabloid headlines. They saw the divorce. They saw pictures of a fractured family trying to navigate heartbreak under a microscope. But they never saw the truth Priscilla guarded in silence. Only a handful of people ever suspected she was carrying something heavier than a memory. Something she replayed in her mind for decades. Something that would flare up whenever an old recording of Elvis's voice played unexpectedly. Something that pulled tears from her eyes even years after she rebuilt her life. Because The Secret wasn't about fame. It wasn't about scandal. It wasn't about protecting Elvis's reputation. It was about protecting Lisa Marie from a burden she didn't deserve. A burden Elvis begged Priscilla not to pass on. And as the years went on, the weight of that promise became heavier, not lighter. Every time Lisa asked about her father's struggles, Priscilla had to hold back the one thing that would answer everything. And ruin everything. Imagine being a mother who loves her daughter more than anything. And still choosing silence. Not because you want to hide the truth, but because you want to save her from it. That was Priscilla's reality. And the truth she kept locked away is the same truth we are about to unravel. This documentary isn't about scandal. It isn't about conspiracy. It isn't about rewriting Elvis's life. It's about the fragile human being behind the music, and the even more fragile child who grew up trying to understand him. It's about a mother's impossible choice, a father's hidden pain, and the one confession Elvis made that changed the Presley family forever. By the time we reach the moment Elvis finally told Priscilla what he feared most, you'll understand why she protected it so fiercely. You'll understand why she never told Lisa. And you'll understand why this secret wasn't meant to diminish her daughter, but to shield her. Because sometimes love doesn't look like honesty. Sometimes love looks like silence. And sometimes the greatest act of devotion is the truth we keep in the dark. Now let's step back in time, to the years when Elvis was still trying to outrun the shadow that was slowly catching up to him. To the years when Priscilla saw the cracks forming long before they ever showed. To the years when a father's fear began shaping a secret a mother would carry until her final breath. This is the beginning of the story. And the secret at the center of it will change everything you thought you knew about Elvis Presley and the family he left behind. To understand the secret Priscilla carried, you must first understand the world she and Elvis built. The world Lisa Marie was born into. The world that looked dazzling from the outside, yet felt fragile on the inside. Because the truth didn't begin with a letter or a confession. It began long before Lisa could speak her first words. Elvis and Priscilla's relationship never fit into any ordinary mold. From the beginning, they lived at the intersection of tenderness and chaos, a place where the world demanded pieces of Elvis faster than he could give them. And through all of it, Priscilla was the quiet, steady presence beside him. She saw the moods. She saw the exhaustion. She saw the way he drifted between joy and a kind of sadness he never named. People saw the fame. Priscilla saw the cost. That's why when Lisa Marie was born, the moment didn't just change their family. It changed the way Elvis looked at the world. In that hospital room, holding his tiny daughter wrapped in a blanket, Elvis whispered something Priscilla never forgot. "She's the only thing I'll ever get right." He said it softly, almost like a prayer, almost like a confession. But even in that joy, Priscilla noticed something else. A flicker of fear behind his eyes. The fear of a man who had already lived a lifetime of scrutiny, pressure, and expectation, and knew that the world was waiting to devour anything he loved. At home, he was gentle with Lisa. He held her carefully, as if she were made of something fragile and easily broken. He talked to her in a voice no one else ever heard. Some nights, he rocked her so slowly that Priscilla would stand in the doorway just to watch. Not because the image was beautiful, but because there was something heartbreaking in the tenderness he showed. He wasn't just loving her. He was clinging to her, as though she was the last piece of innocence he still had left. But the pressures around him didn't pause. The world didn't quiet down just because he became a father. The spotlight still burned. The expectations still piled. And every day, the divide between Elvis the man and Elvis the myth grew wider. Priscilla saw how he pushed himself, how he forced smiles for fans when he was exhausted, how he built an empire that never allowed him to rest, how he tried to give Lisa the world while barely holding himself together. And then came the fear. Not fear of failure, not fear of scandal, but the fear that the darkness he carried, the emotional storms, the guilt, the pressure, would spill into her life. That she would grow up wondering why her father loved her so deeply, yet drifted so painfully far away. Because as the years passed, that's exactly what began to happen. Elvis wasn't cold. He wasn't absent by choice, but he lived in two worlds at once. The public world that demanded his energy, and the private world that required more strength than he had left. Some nights the contrast broke him. He would come home from a show, still trembling from the roar of the crowd, and fall into a quiet so deep it scared Priscilla. He'd bury his face in his hands. He'd mumble things she couldn't fully hear. He'd whisper questions that revealed more pain than anything the newspapers ever wrote. And yet, in front of Lisa, he tried to be light. He tried to be calm. He tried to be everything she deserved. Priscilla recognized that duality. She recognized the cost of it. She recognized the way it would eventually force Elvis to confront the truth he'd been avoiding. Because you can't split yourself forever. Eventually, the fracture shows. And it did. Long before the marriage cracked. Long before the rumors began. Long before the world noticed something was wrong. There was a shift in him. A quietness. A heaviness. A weight he carried in his eyes, even while holding Lisa in his arms. Priscilla knew the man the world adored. But she also knew the man who, late at night, stared into the darkness with a look she couldn't interpret. A look she would see again years later. The night everything changed. But before we reach that moment, there is one more truth you must understand. Priscilla wasn't just Elvis's wife. She was the keeper of his vulnerabilities. The only one who saw the contradiction between his fame and his fear. The only one who understood how deeply he loved Lisa. And how deeply he feared failing her. It was a fear that would eventually break through the surface. A fear that Elvis would finally speak aloud in a moment that shook Priscilla to her core. A fear that would lead to the secret she protected for the rest of her life. And that secret started forming in those early years. In the cracks no one else saw. In the silence between father and daughter. In the weight Elvis tried to hide but could no longer outrun. The pressure began building slowly. A subtle shift at first, like a storm gathering on the horizon. Small changes. Small silences. Small moments when Elvis seemed to drift far away, even while sitting inches from the people he loved. Priscilla noticed every one of them. She noticed the nights he stayed awake, long after she and Lisa had gone to bed. She noticed the mornings when he stared at nothing for minutes at a time. She noticed the way he sometimes paused before entering Lisa's room. Not because he didn't want to see her, but because he didn't want her to see him in the state he was in. There was something growing inside him. A fear, a heaviness, a quiet desperation he tried to hide beneath charm and humor. But the truth is, even a legend can only pretend for so long. There was one moment that Priscilla never forgot. A moment that marked the shift from concern to fear. It happened on a day that should have been ordinary. Elvis had spent the morning playing with Lisa, lifting her onto his shoulders, letting her tug on his hair, making her laugh the way only he could. But after the laughter faded, something inside him dimmed. Priscilla found him in the hallway, leaning against the wall, breathing slow and heavy. His eyes weren't glazed with exhaustion. They were filled with something else. A kind of dread. She touched his arm and asked what was wrong. He didn't answer. He just whispered, almost to himself. She deserves better than this. Priscilla didn't understand. Better than what? Better than him. Better than the life he was giving her. He didn't explain. He simply walked away. That moment planted a seed of worry in Priscilla's heart, one that grew with every passing week. Then came the night Elvis finally cracked. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't explosive. It wasn't the kind of breakdown tabloids would invent. It was quiet, still, fragile. Elvis sat on the edge of his bed, shoulders slumped, his hands trembling slightly. Priscilla sat beside him, waiting for him to speak. She didn't push. She knew that when he was ready, he would open the door himself. And he did. He told her he felt trapped between the world's expectations and his own shortcomings. He told her he feared he was the father Lisa needed. He told her that every time he looked at Lisa, he saw a future he wasn't sure he would be strong enough to give her. "I don't want her to grow up carrying my mistakes," he whispered. That line tattooed itself onto Priscilla's memory. Because he wasn't talking about rumors or scandals or fame. He was talking about the emotional weight inside him. The guilt, the exhaustion, the war he fought in silence. And then he said something even more telling. "She's going to ask questions one day, and I don't know how to answer them." It was the first time he hinted at the secret. The truth he would later ask Priscilla to keep. After that night, the tension only grew stronger. Elvis began distancing himself emotionally at times, not out of neglect, but out of fear. He didn't want Lisa to see his darkness. He didn't want his struggles to shape her childhood. He didn't want her to inherit the pain he carried. And yet, in protecting her, he felt himself drifting further from her. A distance Priscilla could feel in the air around them. Then came the breaking point. A moment that would haunt Priscilla until the day she died. They were arguing, not about love, not about loyalty, but about life. The direction of it. The pressure of it. The toll it was taking on him. And in the heat of that moment, Elvis finally confessed. "I don't want Lisa to carry this, any of it. Promise me you won't tell her." Priscilla froze. She didn't know what this meant at first. Not fully. Not yet. But she could feel the gravity of it. The fear behind it. The quiet plea of a man who was both father and legend. And cracking beneath both roles. She promised him without even knowing what she was promising. Because she could hear the urgency in his voice. The desperation. The need to protect the one piece of innocence he still clung to. And that moment carved a fracture into her heart. Because she knew, with absolute certainty, that Elvis was asking her to protect Lisa not from a scandal. Not from the world. But from the truth about him. The truth that would soon become the secret she guarded for the rest of her life. A truth Elvis himself would reveal fully only once. On a night so private, so heavy, that Priscilla would never speak of it again. A night that changed everything. A night we are about to step into. The night Elvis revealed his truth to Priscilla didn't arrive with thunder. It came quietly, almost gently, like the softest crack forming in the strongest stone. It was late, far past midnight. The house was silent, except for the occasional creak of old wood settling into stillness. Priscilla had already gone to bed, but something made her wake up. A heaviness in the air, a shift in the atmosphere, a feeling that something wasn't right. She found Elvis sitting alone in one of the rooms he rarely used. His Bible lay beside him, closed but touched, as though he'd been holding onto it without knowing what to do with it. He wasn't crying. He wasn't shaking. He wasn't angry. He was simply still. Too still. Priscilla stood in the doorway for a moment, unsure whether to step inside. Elvis didn't acknowledge her at first. He just stared at a spot on the floor, as if the weight of the world had settled right there at his feet. When he finally spoke, his voice broke something inside her. "I don't know who I am anymore." Those words hung in the room like smoke, thick and suffocating. Not dramatic. Not poetic. Just unbearably honest. Priscilla walked toward him slowly, gently, like approaching someone on the edge of a ledge. "Elvis," she whispered, "you're tired. You've been under so much pressure." He shook his head before she could finish. "It's not the pressure," he said softly. "It's me. I've been trying to outrun myself for years, and now I'm losing." A long silence followed. Priscilla could sense where the moment was going, but she wasn't ready for the depth of it. Elvis took a long breath, the kind a person takes when they're about to finally tell the truth they've carried too long. "I don't want Lisa to see this version of me," he said. "I don't want her to grow up wondering why her father disappeared from himself." Priscilla felt her chest tighten. "What do you mean, disappeared?" Elvis rubbed his palms together like he was trying to warm hands that had gone cold. "I feel like I'm fadding Pris, piece by piece, and she's too young to understand any of it. She's too young to carry the guilt of a father who can't stay whole." Another pause. "I don't want her to think I didn't love her enough to stay strong." That sentence hit Priscilla like a punch. "Elvis," she said softly, "Lisa loves you. She adores you. She doesn't see you the way you see yourself." He closed his eyes. "I'm scared she will one day." And then, as if he were peeling back a layer of his own heart, he revealed the truth. He whispered, "I'm drowning, Pris. Drowning. Not failing. Not breaking. Drowning." A word that carries quiet panic. A word that carries desperation. A word that carries the unspoken truth that no one hears you calling for help when the water is calm on the surface. Priscilla reached for his hand, but Elvis pulled back gently, not rejecting her, but protecting her. "I don't want you to save me," he said. "You've done enough, more than enough, but there's something I need you to promise me." Her breath caught. "Promise you what?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, with eyes that held years of guilt, panic, and something she had never seen so clearly before, fear. "If anything happens to me, don't tell Lisa how bad it was. Don't tell her how lost I felt. Don't let her think she failed me." Priscilla froze. "Elvis," she whispered, "you're not going anywhere." He gave a sad smile. "Not dramatic. Not theatrical. Just broken." "We both know that's not true." Priscilla shook her head, refusing to acknowledge what he was implying. But Elvis continued, softly, slowly, like someone lifting a wound they've kept bandaged for too long. "Promise me she won't know this side of me," he said. "Promise me she'll remember the father who sang to her, not the man who spent nights staring at the wall because he didn't know how to keep going." Priscilla's voice trembled. "I don't want to promise that." "You have to." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice cracking. "She's the only thing I ever wanted to protect, even from myself." The confession hit the room with crushing weight. And before she could respond, Elvis lowered his head into his hands and whispered the sentence that became the heart of the secret she'd carry forever. "Don't let her know how much pain I was in." Not because he was ashamed. Not because he wanted to hide from the world. But because he couldn't bear the thought of his daughter growing up thinking she wasn't enough to keep him whole. It was a confession born not of weakness, but of love so intense it fractured him. Priscilla placed her hand on his back, feeling how tense, how rigid, how fragile he'd become. He wasn't a superstar in that moment. He wasn't the king of rock and roll. He wasn't the cultural icon millions worshipped. He was a father terrified of breaking his daughter's heart before she even knew how to protect it. "I promise," she whispered. And Elvis's shoulders eased, but not from relief. From resignation. It was the moment he surrendered the last piece of truth he had left inside him. The moment Priscilla realized she was now the guardian of his greatest fear and greatest love. The moment everything changed. And the moment the secret was born. After that night, nothing felt the same for Priscilla. Not the house, not Elvis's voice, not even the silence. Every word he confessed stayed with her, echoing in the corners of her mind, reshaping every memory she carried of him, every moment she watched him with their daughter. Because after you hear a confession like that, you don't just go back to normal life. You start seeing the person differently. Not worse, not weaker, but more human than you ever thought they could be. And that frightened her more than she admitted. In the days that followed, Elvis tried to act like the conversation had never happened. He smiled. He laughed. He joked. He put on performances, both on stage and at home. But Priscilla could see through the mask. She noticed how long he paused before speaking. She noticed how his breath hitched when he hugged Lisa. She noticed the distant look in his eyes when the house was quiet. She noticed how he touched the Bible at night, not to read it, but just to feel something steady in his hands. He was slipping, not in a dramatic, tabloid way, but in the subtle emotional drift that few people recognized. Priscilla tried to reach him. She tried to give him reassurance. She tried to be the anchor he needed. But no matter what she said, she couldn't erase the truth he had spoken. And she couldn't erase the promise she'd made. The promise that would soon become her burden. Because Lisa Marie began to grow. And with growth came questions. Mom, what was Dad really like? Why did he act strange sometimes? Why did he seem sad in certain pictures? Why does everyone talk about how tired he looked near the end? Each question cut through Priscilla like a blade. She wanted to answer honestly. She wanted to explain the weight Elvis carried. She wanted to tell Lisa that her father's distance was never about her. That it came from fear, from love, from the desire to shield her from the darkest parts of his heart. But she couldn't, because she had promised him. And that promise bound her tongue even when her daughter looked at her with eyes desperate for truth. So she gave gentle answers, soft answers, pieces of the story, but never the whole. Your father loved you more than anything. Sometimes he felt overwhelmed. He wanted to protect you. He had moments of doubt. But she never said the sentence that haunted her nights. He didn't want you to know how much he was hurting. That truth stayed locked inside her. The same way the letter stayed locked in that drawer. The same way Elvis's voice stayed locked inside her memory. And the more Lisa grew, the more Priscilla struggled under the weight of what she couldn't say. Because she knew something Lisa didn't. Something she carried like a hidden scar. Elvis didn't distance himself out of neglect. He distanced himself out of protection, out of fear, out of the belief that he wasn't strong enough to be the father he desperately wanted to be. And that knowledge broke Priscilla in ways she never healed from. When Elvis passed away, the world mourned the icon, the voice, the legend. Priscilla mourned something else entirely. She mourned the man who sat on the edge of the bed that night, whispering truths he had hidden from everyone else. She mourned the father who loved too fiercely and hurt too quietly. She mourned the promise she now had no choice but to keep. A promise that became heavier with each passing year. As the world dissected Elvis's final days, twisting rumors and mythologies, Priscilla kept her silence. Not to protect his reputation, not to hide scandal, but because she refused to betray the last vulnerable moment he ever shared with her. And Lisa lived her entire life searching for answers she never fully found. Not because no one had them, but because the one person who did, the one person who held the final key to understanding Elvis's pain. Couldn't bring herself to turn it. Priscilla wasn't hiding the truth from her daughter out of coldness. She was upholding a father's final wish. A wish born out of love so fierce it broke him. And that conflict, the war between truth and love, shaped every year that followed. Every interview Lisa gave about her father. Every tear she shed in confusion. Every memory she tried to piece together. Priscilla carried the weight of knowing more. Knowing the real reason Elvis struggled. Knowing the real reason he pulled back at times. Knowing the real reason he stared at walls, whispered into the dark, and held onto his daughter like she was the last light in a world that kept dimming. Knowing, most painfully of all, that Elvis didn't want Lisa to see him the way he truly felt inside. And so the secret lived on. In silence, in sacrifice, and in the quiet ache of a mother honoring a father's final plea. It wasn't a scandal. It wasn't a lie. It wasn't manipulation. It was love. Broken, complicated, human, real. A love that left a secret behind. One Priscilla would never tell, and one Lisa would never hear. When the world looks at Elvis Presley today, it sees a legend frozen in time. A man with a voice that shook nations, a presence that bent cultures, a legacy that still echoes across generations. But the truth that lived behind that legend, the truth only Priscilla carried, is what quietly reshaped the Presley family long after Elvis's music stopped. Because secrets don't simply disappear when someone dies. They shift. They settle. They transform into shadows that follow the people left behind. And Priscilla felt that shadow every single day. After Elvis passed, she tried to hold her world together for Lisa. She tried to give her daughter stability, grounding, a sense of identity in the middle of a storm that tore half the family apart. People forget how young Lisa was, how fragile, how confused, how desperately she needed a version of the truth that wouldn't break her spirit. But the truth Priscilla held, the one Elvis whispered that night, wasn't something a child could ever bear. And so she kept it locked away. For years, Lisa searched for her father's essence in all the places children search for what they've lost. She searched in memories. She searched in stories. She searched in interviews, documentaries, conversations with family, whispers from the Memphis Mafia, anything that would help her understand the man she adored but never fully got to know. Everyone had a version of Elvis. Everyone had a piece of him. Everyone had a story. But none of them had the one story Priscilla carried. None had the confession Elvis made in the quiet hours when the masks were off and the pain was bare. Lisa sensed that truth existed, even if she couldn't articulate it. You could see it in her interviews. The way her eyes softened when she talked about him. The way her voice cracked when she spoke about his struggles. The way she said, multiple times, "I wish I knew more about who my father really was." Those words broke Priscilla every time. Because she did know. And she couldn't say. She watched her daughter grow into a woman who battled many of the same demons Elvis did. The emotional weight. The inner storms. The longing for peace. The sense of being both adored and misunderstood. And every time Lisa spiraled, Priscilla relived the promise she made. The promise to protect her from the truth that could have explained everything, but also could have destroyed her understanding of her father. That emotional burden doesn't fade with time. It deepens. Priscilla once told a close confidant something heartbreaking, words the public never heard. "I kept his secret because I loved him. And I kept it from Lisa because I loved her. But sometimes I wonder if love should have been louder. Love should have been louder. A sentence only a mother who lived between two loyalties could ever understand. But the truth is, Elvis's secret didn't vanish. It shaped the way Priscilla raised Lisa. It shaped the way she told stories about Elvis. It shaped the way she protected his name in the press. The way she fought for his legacy. The way she ensured Lisa's inheritance remained sacred. Every part of the Presley empire, Graceland, the archives, the estate, was guarded with a level of care that only makes sense when you understand the weight of the promise behind it. Priscilla wasn't protecting a brand. She was protecting a man who once said, "I don't want her to see me breaking." And so she held the pieces together as best she could. But secrets are strange things. They become part of you. They live inside your breath, inside your memories, inside your silences. They become the invisible thread that shapes your choices. When anniversaries passed, when crowds gathered outside Graceland, when fans cried beside the gates, Priscilla felt a deeper grief than anyone else. Not just because she had lost a husband, but because she had lost the only other person who knew the truth she now held alone. Years later, when Lisa walked the same hallways her father walked, when she sang the songs he once sang, when she fought her own emotional battles, Priscilla wondered whether she had done the right thing, whether the truth could have helped her daughter understand herself, or whether the truth would have broken her. These questions haunted her far longer than grief itself. Because grief is heavy, but regret is heavier. Every time Lisa asked about Elvis's loneliness, Priscilla heard echoes of that night. Every time Lisa wondered why her father drifted, Priscilla remembered the tremble in Elvis's voice when he begged her not to let Lisa see his pain. Every time Lisa said she felt connected to her father in their shared struggles, Priscilla felt her stomach twist with the knowledge that those struggles came from a place Lisa never knew existed. But despite all this, despite the silence, despite the burden, despite the years of carrying a half-told story, Priscilla never broke the promise. Not once. Not in interviews. Not in books. Not in documentaries. Not even in private moments of weakness. That is the kind of loyalty that reshapes a life. That is the kind of love that endures even when everything else crumbles. That is the kind of sacrifice only someone who saw the real Elvis could ever understand. Because Priscilla didn't just lose a husband. Lisa didn't just lose a father. The world didn't just lose a star. They all lost the man who whispered a final truth with his heart in his hands. I don't want her to know how much I was hurting. And that truth, that one fragile truth, is what became the silent force guiding the Presley family's future. Not fame, not music, not money, not legacy. A promise, a quiet one, a painful one. A promise born out of a father's fear and a mother's devotion. And even today, decades after Elvis left the world, you can still feel that promise lingering in the way Priscilla speaks about him, in the way she guarded Lisa, in the way she holds the Presley name with both hands, as if protecting a flame that could go out at the slightest breeze. What remains now, in the wake of everything lost, is the emotional echo of that secret. A reminder that even icons break, even legends drown, even the strongest hearts carry shadows. And sometimes the greatest act of love is the truth we choose not to share. There is a moment near the end of every story when silence says more than any revelation ever could. And in the Presley story, that silence belongs to Priscilla. For decades, she carried the weight of Elvis's final confession. A weight she never passed to Lisa. A weight she never offered to the world. A weight she held not out of secrecy, but out of love. Because Priscilla understood something most people never grasp. Sometimes the truth doesn't heal. Sometimes it wounds. Sometimes it takes more from you than it gives. And sometimes, just sometimes, the kindest thing you can do is protect someone from the questions that have no answers. Today, when we talk about Elvis's legacy, we talk about the music, the fame, the cultural impact. But there is another legacy. One softer, one more fragile, one hidden in the quiet corners of a family's grief. The legacy of unspoken love. The legacy of a father who wanted his daughter to remember him by his light, not his shadows. The legacy of a mother who carried his truth so her daughter wouldn't have to. The legacy of a promise whispered on a night when Elvis Presley, the icon, the king, the legend, was simply a man begging not to break the heart of the child he adored. And now, with time stretching far beyond those moments, with Lisa gone and Elvis long gone, the secret doesn't carry the same weight it once did. It doesn't threaten to shatter anyone. It doesn't tremble with danger. It simply reveals something we too often forget. Behind every legend is a human being. A human being with fears. A human being with regrets. A human being who doubts himself even while the world worships him. The truth Elvis told Priscilla that night wasn't a scandal. It wasn't a confession of wrongdoing. It wasn't a revelation meant to shock. It was a father's heartbreak, a father's fear, a father's plea to protect the child he loved so deeply it frightened him. And Priscilla, with all her strength, with all her flaws, with all her humanity, did exactly that. She protected Elvis. She protected Lisa. She protected the fragile connection that lived between them. Even when it tore her apart. Even when the world asked questions she couldn't answer. Even when she watched her daughter walk through life, searching for a truth Priscilla wasn't allowed to speak. That is not weakness. That is not deception. That is not silence born of shame. That is love. Quiet, imperfect, devastating love. As this chapter of the Presley story closes, one truth becomes clear. Some legacies are built from gold and records and fame. Others are built from the unspoken moments that ripple through a family long after the cameras stop flashing. Elvis left the world music, but he left Priscilla something far heavier. And she carried it with grace. Not because she had to, but because she promised him she would. In the end, love isn't just what we say out loud. Love is the truth we choose to protect. Love is the burden we choose to lift for someone else. Love is the silence we hold when speaking would break someone we cannot bear to see shattered. And now that silence is all that remains. A quiet reminder that behind every icon, behind every legend, behind every legacy, there is a heart that feared being seen too clearly, and a woman who chose to shield the world from the part of that heart that beat in pain. If you believe more untold stories from Elvis's world deserve to be heard, you're in the right place. There are still truths in the shadows of Graceland. Truths waiting to be uncovered. Truths waiting to be told. Truths that reveal not just the legend Elvis was, but the man he truly was beneath it all. Thank you for staying with this story. And if you want to continue discovering the hidden side of Elvis Presley's life, the secrets, the emotions, the legacy left behind, Make sure to subscribe and join us for the next chapter, because this story is only the beginning.